So the first thing that I want to talk about is kind of the symbolism that we have for noses. So I'm going to start with a goofy drawing, I feel, of how we're taught to draw noses. We learn that noses have a boundary on each side, right? And then we kind of learn like this triple looped W thing for the rest of the nose. And this is for like the wings of the nose and then the round ball of the nose. And I know this is silly, I know that this is like, what we learn in school, but it really impacts how we think about things. So then after that, we learn that we have these holes, kind of circular. Let me grab a different pencil. That one is like squeaky. See if this one's squeaky. Not squeaky. Great. So we learn we have these like holes for nostrils in the bottom. So even when, we kind of move away from this, like this is what we learn in school, even when we move away from that and we start looking at photo references or people in front of us or paintings or whatever, we tend to think in these terms, even though that's not what we're seeing and it's not what we're looking at. So I feel like we are always fighting this. So we're fighting especially the idea that the sides of the nose have some kind of a boundary, and especially the idea that the nostrils are holes in the bottom of the nose. So that's what, at first, I want to just talk about the anatomy and try and get us away from those ideas that those two things, especially those two things, exist. Hi, Nikki. Good to see you. All right, so let's tackle this idea first, the idea that there is a boundary on either side of the nose. There is not a boundary on either side of the nose. What you have instead is like a ramp. So symbolically, if I were to draw it from the side, it's like a skateboard ramp. I think about that because my son likes to skateboard. So you've got something more like this going on, then the nostrils would be down here somewhere. You'd kind of be looking up at the nose, and this is the front plane of the nose. So you really, instead of having a boundary, you just have like a gentle curve from the cheeks going up and over the top of the nose and then down. So you can kind of picture that happening. So instead of drawing a boundary, try and look for those shapes of those ramps on either side of the nose. And what you will see is right underneath here, and actually I'm going to sketch this and then I'm going to grab a model that I have. But you'll see a ramp kind of like this on each side of the nose. And I'm going to draw it darker because I'm on video here, right? So this line here, these two lines, there and there, you will see an indentation where the eye socket is on each side, and you'll see an indentation that goes kind of by the wing of the nose. So you will actually be able to see those two lines when you look on a nose. So let me grab this head here and show you what I mean. All right, so bringing this back to me. Hi, Jessica. All right, here's a guy with a nose. So here are the lines that I'm talking about. Right there, there's this line behind the wing of the nose. And then here, and you can kind of see it maybe better on this side, there's a little plane direction there. But what's happening is the skin, it's not like it's flat and then it goes straight up over the edge. The skin forms a ramp going over the top of the nose. So we want to look for that. And actually that distance from there to there is super important. So if you find that you're always making the nose too long or you're making the nose too short, look for that edge underneath the eye and look for the edge here with the crease by the side of the nose. And that distance will give you the length of the nose and makes it a lot easier. I also want to show you really quick this skull so that you can see that there's skin and everything in there, right, over the cheeks. But this part is basically what we're drawing there with that skateboard ramp. We're trying to go like up the cheekbone on the underneath side of the eye socket and then where that indentation is here. So there's usually some cartilage here, so the nose comes out further, but we're looking for this ramp first. Hi, Lee. I would love to see your and your daughter's drawings afterwards. That would be super fun. Okie dokie, back to sketching. So, first thing is that you want to look for that ramp. That's what I would do first. And if you think about it, that section of the nose where you're going from the cheeks and the skin is going up and over the nose and then down the other side, that's much bigger actually than the whole entire rest of the nose. So I would look for that section first. Okay? Then down here, I find that usually there is an overall kind of triangular shape to the nose. And I have that squeaky pencil again. So I prefer to think of the bottom part of the nose as having more of a wedge shape than this kind of triple curve W. So I would look at that first. And now I'm going to talk about the nostrils, right? So the nostrils first, I'm going to kind of sketch in what I mean, and then I'm going to talk about what I mean. So I think it can be really difficult to make something that looks good if you're thinking about the nostrils as being holes, because really they're not closed holes, and there is a time when the nostrils and the shadow underneath can make a circle, and I'm going to make some recommendations about that in a minute. But for now, what I want you to think about is the fact that there is cartilage, and I'm going to draw, in addition to this, you guys can see there, right? Okay. I'm going to draw a sideways view as well. So if this is just the bottom of the front of the nose, and there would be a nostril like this, and then the back of the wing of the nose, so the philtrum, that part that goes down to the lips, would be here. Hopefully this doodle makes sense. I feel like my doodles are kind of crazy sometimes. But what's happening here is in the center you have the septum, and there's cartilage that's wrapping around underneath here and connecting to the philtrum. So I feel like that's important point number one, is this skin is just continuing and traveling on down there. It doesn't really stop. Sometimes from the front it might look like there's a little line there because, you know, sometimes this curve is like this. Sometimes it kind of dips up a little bit first and then goes down, you know, just depending on the person. Hi, Carrie. Hi, Ruthie. Good to see you both here. But the skin continues here. And then the same thing here around the back wing of the nostril. It's not just like closed there. This skin here continues and connects into this mustache area. So there is definitely this kind of like arch here, but all this skin from the mustache area just continues into the nostril. The skin there doesn't stop. There is no physical line there. It's just a continuous piece of skin. So the only edge that you have is here along the top. So if I come back to this view, you've got the edge here along the top, and then this just fades out. Okay, so the skin attaches, and there shouldn't really be a line to mark the end of that there. Okay, so hard edge on top, soft or non-existent edges on the bottom. Hi, Clarissa. So I'm just going to do a little bit of erasing here. All right, Now, sometimes on these kind of outside wings of the nose, sometimes I don't put too much information. I find you can go overboard with the idea of there being kind of a hook or something like that. So I usually keep it pretty simple. And after this, I just look for shading information. And typically, the shading information, if we're talking about a light source coming from up here, which is usual, we usually have light coming from above us, and it's helpful if it's kind of off to one side, then this whole bottom section of the nose is going to be in shadow. And this side of the nose will be in shadow or halftone too. So you might have a line that's going up the side of the nose, which I said there isn't. I said there's no line at the side of the nose, but sometimes you do have a shadow edge there. But shadow edges are generally a little bit soft and they're not actually lines. And definitely you don't want a line on each side of the nose because it just kind of doesn't make sense. Then the nose will cast a shadow as well because it's going to block that light. And since this is kind of a side light sort of a deal, maybe the cast shadow would go something like that. I'm just making it up, so who knows. So this is where sometimes you end up with a circular shape because the nose, this kind of protruding front part of the nose here, is casting a shadow. And then when you connect that with that arch on top of the nostril, it makes a circle. If you find that this is happening when you're drawing somebody, if you really allow that circle to continue, it makes somebody look like they have a pig nose. So I would just recommend softening the bottom of the shadow there and leaving the top edge crisp, or just artificially change the shape. Like, you would be amazed how much you can get away with changing things from what you see and from reality and still having it look right. So for example, you could let the shadow kind of come up a little bit and then back down, but anything just so that it's not a closed circle. Or you could give it some shading like this, like kind of dark at the top, and then just let it like gently fade off at the bottom so it's not just a round edge, okay? I'm going to continue filling in kind of what I think a shadow would look like on this person. They'd have an eye socket in here. And I'm almost going to be done with the anatomy aspect here. I'll do a little shading here too, why not? And let's say the person's lighting is coming from this direction up top. Well, the shadow might look something like that. All right. So this is the basic idea of what I look for with shading, and there's definitely more that I would do, like this is an indentation in here, so there gets to be a little bit of shading there. This little plane here actually usually catches some light, so it stays light. And then this section is light along with the top, but there might be a little bit of shading here with the eye socket. And then anything that happens here is just minor. It's not really heavily shaded. There's not a lot of contrast. It'll just be a little bit of difference. So what I'm looking for in those areas is to really think about the surface. And remember that I said before that this is a skateboard ramp. So you really want to think about that. Like, if all your marks were being made by little skateboard wheels going up over the top of this ramp, make marks going in those directions so it goes up and over. So especially on the light side, I like to think about the direction of the surface The shadow side, I don't include quite as much information. So sometimes it goes with the surface like this and sometimes not. But even as you might, let's say, like add a highlight in here somewhere, try and keep those marks in some way, shape, or form kind of sitting on the surface. And you can go perpendicular as well. So you can go up and down. I just think you got to be careful sometimes about making things too like linear in a drawing, if that makes sense. Hi Daniel and hi Alexander. All right. So let me think if there's anything else about the anatomy that I wanted to say. I think there was a little. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the nose. So anatomically, we've got the skateboard ramp, right? And we've got the nostrils that are not circles and they're not holes, but they're arches with the wings of the nose and the septum physically connecting to the skin underneath. And the skin here from the mustache area goes up into the nostril. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is that the nose doesn't sit on a flat plane. So if I were to think about the depth, right? Like this part here is close, right? The end of the nose is close to me, so it's more forward here. The wings of the nostril are back, right? So here is pulled back. And the septum is somewhere in between. And that's because if you were going to look at a person from underneath, like you're looking up their nose, I want to make sure you guys can see there. Okay. If you were looking up their nose, they have underneath their nose teeth. So I don't know, again, if my doodles make sense here, but you could be looking, up at someone's teeth if you were able to see through their lips, right? And then somewhere up here on top of that is the nose. So the nose is sitting on a curved surface, right? And so you can feel this if you like take your hand and you cover your mouth as if you just like said a really bad swear word or something. You can feel that curve going around your face. So that's why the nostril sits back here somewhere, right? The wings of the nose sit back here. The nostrils come out from there. And then the tip of the nose is forward. So the septum is further forward than the wings of the nostril. So keep that in mind when you're drawing a nose, both from the side, that the wings of the nostril need to be back, and from your front view. Just keep in mind that this section is physically closer to you than this section when you're shading. Any questions so far, you guys? Oh my God, I see what this looks like on the camera since it's from the side, and it looks hilarious. It looks so angled. All right. Well, feel free to ask any questions as we go along. But in the meantime, I'm going to move on to drawing this Rembrandt nose. Hi Jennifer, hi Vanya, hi Steven, and Julia, and Brianna, and Ruthie. Hello everybody. I see you guys over on my page. I figured out how to kind of check some more of my comments there. I'm glad to hear I have subtitles. That's awesome. Okay, so let's see if I can maybe put that up there somewhere. Yeah, I guess that'll work. Cool. All right, neat. Now, a tip I have for some of you guys is that, usually when I'm drawing, I will start with vine charcoal. Vine or a willow, to me, they work pretty similar. So this is a piece of vine charcoal, and I feel like you can tell the difference between vine and willow charcoal and compressed charcoal in a couple different ways. One is that vine and willow charcoal feels like really oddly flimsy and weak, and compressed charcoal feels heavier and sturdier. Also, usually compressed charcoal is kind of mechanical. I think I have a stick of it here. So I don't know if you can tell the difference on the screen, but this is definitely man-made. There's like a number in there. It's a little bit heavier and it's like perfectly smooth. Whereas this one, you can kind of see like the natural fibers of the plant that was burned to create this. And the other aspect is that when you sketch with a compressed charcoal and you wipe away at it, it doesn't go anywhere. But when you sketch with vine, it like just about disappears. So then if you take an eraser to it, again, the compressed charcoal kind of stays there, but the vine charcoal just about erases. So since I'm in a time crunch today, I'm skipping the step of using the vine charcoal, but that's kind of my secret for making all of my guesses, because I make a lot of mistakes when I draw, and if you use this stuff first, your mistakes disappear and nobody ever knows about it. So that's just my extra tip that does not necessarily have to do with noses for you today. All right, so let's take a look at this reference. Here is that ramp that I was talking about. So there's a line here. It's really gentle. And there's just a hint of the line here. You can see where there's shading this way, and then it gets light here, and that's because this plane is facing the light source and this plane is facing away. So there's the one side of the ramp. The top part of the ramp on her, like the part facing up, is, really narrow. And then here's the side of the ramp going down. Hopefully you can see this line here. Some people it's really defined and some people it's softer, but there it is. That's the ramp that I'm talking about on her, the little skateboard guy going over it. Thank you so much, Alexander. That is sweet. So there's that ramp, and I'm going to be looking for that. And there is a shading edge here, but again, notice like how delicate that is. It's really soft. There's a really nice shadow edge here where everything is a bit darker, and there is actually this shape that I talked about where there's the top of the nostril making a line, and then it casts shadow underneath that kind of makes a circle. So in my drawing, I'm going to be downplaying that a bit. I'm going to focus a little bit more on this cast shadow here, and this side I'm actually probably going to make that part just a little bit lighter as I go. Okay, so that is my plan. think I probably mentioned this before. If you've seen any of my other lessons here on Facebook, I start just about everything with some kind of straight lines, just really general. And I'm not really going to worry about the nostrils right now. They're kind of small shapes. I'm just looking at that kind of triangular shape that I talked about at the bottom of the nose. And then I'm going to look kind of for that ramp. And the ramp goes kind of this way. Hopefully you guys can see that all pretty well. Had to get my live feedback. All right, keep changing the angle on that. There we go. So I am looking at the distance from here to here. It's like I said, I think it's just really helpful to try and get the length of the nose about right. And because we have so much symbolism about the nose and we have so much symbolism about the eye itself, we really don't have any symbolism on the shape of that cheek there. So I just find it's really super helpful to look at that before anything else. When I look at the top of this edge, it's like there's a little bit of shading that hangs down, and it's kind of over that little direction change in the nose. So I'm just gonna sketch that in there approximately. Remember that you can always change your mind. And on this side, the line seems a little bit higher, but it's also related just structurally to a little bit different part of the face. So I don't know how much of that you can see, but to me, this is good enough to get started. I know the shapes aren't all completely correct, but I don't really worry about getting all the shapes correct at the beginning when I'm working on toned paper, because I'm able to go over the top with white and do a lot of things so that I can change my mind quite a lot. If I'm working on white paper, I'm a little bit more careful than this. That's why I like gray paper. So this is all shadow. There's a form shadow here, just meaning the nose is turned away from the light, and a cast shadow there. And then all along here, it's almost like there's just this stripe of halftone. It tapers toward the top. It's like more narrow at the top, wider at the bottom, but it's all basically halftone in there. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of shading, not quite as much as the actual shadows. Hi, Wes. And I don't know how to say your name, Gianmarco. Good to see you on here. It's just for fun. I'm going to use this fluffy brush on here because I like to do that. If you don't have a fluffy brush, this is just a makeup brush, by the way. You can just use a paper towel or the side of your hand or something, but I like to do that, kind of smear everything together a little bit. So I'm going to, before I go into the shadows, a lot of times I start with the shadows. I'm going to start on the light side here. So I am going to, even though there are all these little shapes in here, I'm just first going to go across the whole light side and do this kind of thing. So I'm kind of going down that ramp here, over the top of the nose there. And I'm also going to shade in kind of some of this mustache area around there. I'm going to allow just a little bit of light to go through this halftone area because halftone area is on the light side. It is getting a little bit of light. All right. So I'm going to keep working on the light side. So that just sounds fun right now. I'm going to start on the bottom of the nose. So right around here, there's a highlight. I'm going to start to build that up. Maybe I'll do a little more later. And now I'm going to try and make kind of this overall shape. And I'm turning my marks as I go because I'm thinking about the surface. Like this surface is turning this way. And then over here it goes this way and then maybe around that nostril a bit again. So I'm just kind of following those forms. I've got my squeaky pencil back here because I want to start to shape some of the halftone here on the outside of the nostril. And I don't want it to be as dark as the shadow. So that's kind of one of the keys is in your shading, you need your halftone to stay separate from your shadow. It can't be as dark as your shadow. And if it does get as dark as your shadow, you either want to erase it back a little bit or mix some white into it or make your shadow darker. That's another option too. I find a lot of times people don't really go dark enough with shadows. So that is always an option. I'm also going to brighten up this area. That really helps that halftone look even darker. So I might end up raking over that with white, like I said, and I'm going to make the shadow darker a bit too, so we'll kind of see what happens, but putting that white here just really makes that form look even darker. Now this cast shadow down here, like I said, I kind of want to soften it a little bit, so I'm going to start doing that. I was automatically kind of just putting in the curve that I see there, but I'm going to let the white kind of rake over the edge a little bit so that it's not a harsh edge. All right. I'm coming back in. Now this is a medium pencil. I was using a hard pencil up here. And I'm going to shape just the top part of the nostril. And I'm trying not to exactly like make a line. So I'm kind of shading back and forth so that it's more shading, just because lines really look pretty artificial on anything natural. So it's more like I want to push the shading upwards in order to shape that nostril. And then kind of let it fade at the bottom. I'm going to restate there is a bit of a form shadow edge here. So I'm going to bring that up from where I had it before. Like I said earlier, I make a lot of drawing mistakes, or I change my mind a lot, whichever one you want to think of it as. I feel like, you know, mistakes are like, it's bad, right? If you made a mistake, it's like, oh no, that's embarrassing. But everybody that I've ever seen demonstrate their artwork changes their mind about what they're doing. And I feel like that's a good thing. It just means that you noticed something, right? So I think that's how anybody gets good at drawing or painting, is just by changing their mind, seeing something that you want to make better. So I'm doing the same thing here with the nostril. I'm drawing the top edge, but you know, it's hard to really, even on this, to see a front edge on that. So, you know, it's often good if we can't see it, don't make it up. Most of the time. Not all the time, but in general. If you can't see it, especially in the shadow, just leave it out. Sometimes if you try and make it happen, it makes it look incorrect. A lot of times there's just stuff that we cannot see in the shadows. And actually somebody left a really cool comment on one of my YouTube videos about the way that like cones and rods work. And I need to check it out because it was really interesting. And it was a literal reason for why we can't see details in the shadows. So yeah, just leave a lot of those details out of the shadows. I'm just going to change the shape of this cast shadow a little bit. Now out here at this outside wing of the nose, let's focus over there for a minute while I keep changing my mind on the shape of the shadows. But what's happening here is, what's happening here is there's a form shadow. So this round part of the nostril turns away from the light, but then it casts a little bit of a shadow right here. So kind of that little sliver of the shadow, that's a cast shadow, so it needs to be darker than the rest. So I'm going to shade that part a bit darker, and that'll just give a little bit of definition to the back of the nostril. And also, I think this is pretty important, but I'm not going to completely connect that with this nostril shape. I'm going to let it fade off by the time it gets there. Again, because I don't really want to outline that. I don't want to make it seem like the skin of the nostril stops here somewhere. That skin of the nostril connects to the rest of the skin. Sometimes I've got to see underneath my drawing on the reference. And again here, as I'm coming out of the shadow into the halftone, I'm thinking about this surface and what would happen if I was a little person walking along the surfaces here. I would kind of take that sort of path. So you're going to notice that my shading marks follow that. And she's got a little bit of a form here. I'm going to put it in a little bit, but not too much. So this, I still have this medium pencil, but I'm using it really lightly. And I tend to have a really, really light touch. So if you're someone that you tend to make heavier marks, you just might want to switch over to a hard pencil for some of this work that's in the halftone. And before I really do a lot more there, I'm going to creep up the side of the nose here. This side of the ramp is facing a little bit away from the light. So again, I'm not going quite as dark and defined as in the shadows underneath the nose, because this is a halftone rather than a shadow. And just what that means is that if you were a little bug sitting there, you'd still be able to see the light source. You're getting a little bit of light, just not a ton of direct light, so it looks a little bit like shading, right? And it's kind of like her nose gets a little bit more narrow right in there. So I'll just let the shading come in a bit, right in the middle. And then whatever's going on up here somewhere with the eye. Alright, so I'm kind of going in a circle. I started over here, went around the nose, and now I'm coming back around this way. So definitely I need some form here, but in general, I think it's not a good idea to put a line there on the other side of the nose. Even sometimes when there's an actual edge overlapping the cheek, sometimes it's good to just let it like disappear and not be in there. So what I'm going to do instead of putting a line there is, you can see there's not even a halftone, maybe just a lack of highlighting in this area. So what I'm going to do instead of making that darker is I'm going to make this section lighter, kind of in a long upside down tear shape. And then the same thing over here, I'm going to make that lighter. And by contrast, that will look darker. And it's going to be much more gentle so that it doesn't read as a line. And the other thing actually that I'm going to do, maybe even before I begin, yes, before I begin, because I've already started, it's like my hand just wants to do it, is I'm going to go over this just a little bit because it's a bit dark. So it just takes a second, and that brings it into halftone instead of into shadow. And I want to bring that highlight forward a little bit. Anyway, okay, back up here. So there's kind of a long upside down teardrop shape that starts somewhere around here. And it winds up, like if this was that side of the ramp, like points to it up here. So now I know about how big I need to make this shape. I'm doing my lines kind of horizontal here because this is that top plane of that ramp I was talking about. And now that looks maybe a little like too solid of a shape. So I'm gonna I'm adding kind of like squiggly up and down marks. I don't want them to be too up and down, but just something a little bit in the middle. And then kind of some crazy sideways marks coming out just to sort of spread that shape out a little bit so it's not too unnatural. You know, I want to make it kind of fade and blend in. Connect it down here just a little more maybe. All right, and then over here, we've got some light on the skin going down that ramp on the cheek. So you can see that's starting to make that little bit of shading in there just by shading around it lighter. Now if you're working on white paper, you just have to be very, very careful in adding that kind of light shading. Like the little light bit in here, if you're trying to do that with a graphite pencil or something, you just need to be really, really delicate. Maybe use a really hard pencil and almost no pressure on the end of it. I'm doing this because I feel like the nose could be a little bit taller up there to the bridge. So when I look at the placement of that shading compared to the lightest part, it can come up a little bit. Let's see. Before I finish up, I'm gonna drag a little bit more of the shading down too. Hi Orly, and hi Lindsay. I know we are winding down here. It's toward the end of the hour. How are you guys doing out there? Still got a few hangers on. Awesome. I'm glad you guys stuck with me. All right, guys. Well, honestly, I could draw on this all day long, and pretty much I think that about everything. I could just draw all day, adding layers and layers and layers. But anyway, this is the essence of what I wanted to share with you guys today. So just to recap, the nose does not have boundaries. It has a ramp that goes over the top. So these sections that go down towards the cheek on each side, and then the flat part on the top. And making your marks kind of follow that gives the nose a sense of roundness, whereas putting a line on each side just makes things kind of like artificial, flat, and blocky. And then about the bottom of the nose, remember that the nostrils are not really holes in the bottom of the nose. It's really just that the septum and the wings of the nose are attaching onto the mustache area. So think of that and make sure that you don't draw a circle And in fact, try and keep any shadows that are creating a circular type shape with the nostril kind of soft on the bottom. All right, so I'm gonna bring you back to me. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Again, if you can send a donation over toward Inner Urban Art House, they are supporting these weekly lessons. Next week, we are drawing hair, I think we're doing hair next week. So that's one that I get asked a lot. How do you draw hair? How do you paint hair? So we're gonna draw hair, and same time, same place, 5 p.m. Central Time on Facebook. And last week I promised a PDF about drawing hands, and it's in the works. I'm working on it. I've actually been illustrating it on my iPad, which is a new thing for me. I am not used to like digital drawing, but I've got a bunch of illustrations done for it. So if you want that, keep in contact with me, sign up on my email list, because I'm going to just send it out to absolutely everybody on my email list. So if you're on there, you're going to get it. I'll try and remember to make a Facebook post about it. You can harass me for it, but that is on the way. And if you guys have anything else that you want to see on here, or any other way that I can help with these subjects that I posted, just let me know. And if you have done a drawing for this week, for the noses, or for another week, please share that with me. It's really fun for me to get to see that and get to see what people are doing with these. So everybody stay safe, everybody stay healthy, and thank you so much, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys.